what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Today's podcast launches on the 4th of July, and in these United States of America, that means Independence Day, fireworks, hot dog eating contest, and the high point of summer, of course, barbecue. We may not agree on a lot in this country of ours these days, but on this birthday number 248 for the U.S., I think we can all agree that food prepared slowly and carefully using tried and true traditional techniques, cooked low and slow and enjoyed among family and friends. This is one of our best summer traditions in the US of A. And again, we may not agree on the specifics of the food. I think we can also agree that American style barbecue is one of our greatest national treasures. And we can also agree that barbecue is a noun, right? Yeah, it's a noun. So anyway, on this Independence Day episode of the Low and Slow Barbecue Show, I'm sharing some of my favorite July 4th recipes. You can find a lot of these over at the blog at lowslowbbqshow.com. And if you subscribe to the Lowdown newsletter, I'll send recipes like this to your email inbox every Tuesday. But for this day, our 4th of July, here are some of my favorites. And since this holiday celebrates the colony's victory over our cruel British overlords, it's only fitting that the first recipe comes from England. Well, sort of. So these are the 4th of July ribs that we shared and talked about a couple years ago on the Low and Slow Barbecue Show. A fella and a friend named Jim Ernst, also known as Chicken Bone, is in London, England right now. But I tell you, he is Carolina through and through. He attended the University of South Carolina, spent a bunch of years in Charlotte. In fact, that's where he met the backyard barbecue expert and master, Jeff Osborne. Jeff showed Chicken Bone the ins and outs and the barbecue ropes, and now Jim is over in England showing the Limeys how to cook barbecue proper. So I'm going to share with you Jim's special technique for cooking barbecue ribs. So first of all, let's talk about the rub. He puts a rub on there, and this rub will make about a mason jar full of your barbecue rib rub. It includes a half cup of paprika, a half cup of kosher sea salt, a half cup of granulated garlic. Granulated is what they have in Britain. So, maybe get powdered garlic, granulated, powdered, whatever. You want a half a cup of granulated garlic, a half a cup of granulated onion, a quarter cup of chili powder, a quarter cup of cumin, 2 tablespoons of black pepper, 2 tablespoons of dry mustard, 2 tablespoons of chili powder, and 1 tablespoon of cayenne pepper. So what you're going to do is rub this on the ribs. Now, Jim, over in Britain and Europe, he uses Iberian ribs. It's just really fancy, and from what I'm told, they're really good, super meaty, very tender. Here in the U.S., you just get whatever pork ribs you want. You'll want to apply a coat of peanut oil or olive oil on the ribs, and then put a light coat of brown sugar, about a half cup over the ribs. You put that on before you put the rub, and that really helps avoid the clumping, as if you included the sugar in the rub, it would really clump up a lot. So put the brown sugar on the ribs first. And then after the sugar, cover up the meat in that Carolina rub. You don't use all the rub, just use some of it. I've got something to tell you you're going to want to use the rub for here in just a moment. But cover those ribs in rub, let it get some meat sweats on. I don't feel like you got to let it marinate overnight or anything like that, but just let it get a good sweat on, and then put those ribs into your smoker. Jim says you want to cook them at 225 Fahrenheit. That's 107 degrees Celsius for anybody that is listening in the UK. And Jim, he uses the Kamado Joe with a ribolator, and that gives a nice rotation on the ribs. It's a nonstop movement. It keeps the smoke and the heat all fairly well circulated, but really whatever you have is going to work. Just cook those ribs at 225, and you're going to want to cook them about 5 hours over indirect heat. Jim recommends cherry wood smoke. Now, 3 hours into the cook, that's when you're going to want to start misting the ribs with mop about every half hour. So this is where things get a little bit interesting, I think. For the mop concoction, Jim takes his rub and puts it in a coffee maker in the filter puts it in the coffee maker, all those ingredients, and then he fills up the water reservoir with whatever you prefer, whether that's dill pickle juice, apple cider vinegar, or apple juice. One of those is fine. And then just brew yourself up a pot of rub coffee. And it's not coffee, but it's your rub mop, basically. You're just brewing it right through your coffee maker like you would coffee, only you're using the rub in that coffee filter. So you get your decanter filled with that good moppy liquid, and you want to spray that on the ribs every 30 minutes during the last couple of hours of your cooking time. Then, after 5 hours of cooking, let the ribs rest and you're ready to eat. So that's our main course, our main dish for 4th of July, our 4th of July ribs from jolly old England, celebrating our victory over the British overlords. Can't go wrong with Jim's ribs. Now, we're going to take it into a side dish now, and this is one of my favorites. It's 4th of July baked beans. What I'm about to share with you is my mother's recipe for baked beans. And unfortunately, I lost my mom last year in October. She was always excited about 4th of July. She said she was supposed to be born on the 4th of July. That's when they predicted it was going to happen. But somehow she came out a few days later on July 9th. So, we'll mark her birth and her passing on July 9th. But I wanted to share with you this great recipe for her baked beans. And it's one of my favorite recipes that she always produced on Independence Day. So you're going to get 2 16-ounce cans of pork and beans, 1 medium onion, chop it up, 1.5 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, 2 drops of hot sauce. Now, she put drops in there. That's what her handwriting says in the recipe that I still have. I think you could probably go more than 2 drops. It's just up to you on how hot you want to have it. 2 cloves of garlic chopped up, 2 heaping tablespoons of brown sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of dry mustard. That's a half teaspoon of dry mustard, 1 teaspoon of vinegar, and then if you want to, add a teaspoon of liquid smoke. Just up to you if you like a smoky flavor in your beans. I definitely recommend the liquid smoke, but go easy on that. She says the teaspoon, you probably want to keep it really light because the liquid smoke is super strong. In addition, you're going to need a 1/4 cup of ketchup, a 1/4 cup of molasses, 1 teaspoon of salt, a dash of black pepper, and bacon strips. So you're going to mix all those ingredients except the bacon strips up into a big bowl and then pour it out into a casserole dish and then lay those bacon strips on the top and cook it at 300 degrees for 4 hours. Always comes out super good, very flavorful. Again, you can make it as spicy or as smoky as you want, depending on how much of the heat you want to add with the hot sauce or that liquid smoke. Either way, it's a great side for your 4th of July. So moving on, we've talked about our main course, our ribs. We've talked about our baked beans side dish, Mom's 4th of July baked beans. So you can't have an Independence Day picnic without a dessert. And while I certainly encourage you to enjoy cheerwine during your 4th of July festivities, I'm going to share a recipe that uses this nectar of North Carolina. In fact, in case you didn't know, cheerwine was first sold here in a general store in Salisbury, North Carolina back in 1917. And for the record, there is no wine in cheerwine, but there is cheerwine in this cake and its frosting. So the ingredients. You're going to need 1 box of devil food cake mix. I know you're getting a cake mix. You're not baking it from scratch. That's kind of cheating. But hey, come on. It's 4th of July. It's the middle of summer. It's too hot to be worried with all that. Take it easy on yourself. Get a box of devil's food cake mix. And the cake mix, you're going to need 3 eggs, a 1/2 cup of vegetable oil, 1 1/3 cups of cheerwine, born in the South and raised in a glass it is, 1 teaspoon of almond extract. And so those are your ingredients. To get it going, you're going to heat the oven at 350. You'll want to grease and flour your cake pan. Prepare the cake mix as directed, except instead of using water, you're going to use the cheerwine. Add your almond extract and then bake it as directed. As directed on the package, of course, right? So, bake it for that time, mix all the ingredients, oven at 350 degrees, cook it for about 35 or 40 minutes. That's pretty much what they're going to direct you to do there in your devil's food cake mix. Then you're going to frost it with cheerwine frosting. So for the frosting, You're going to make that while the cake's baking. To do that, you need a third cup of cheer wine, a half cup of margarine, a quarter cup of sweetened cocoa, 2.5 cups of powdered sugar, a quarter teaspoon of almond extract, and 1 cup of chopped walnuts toasted. In a small saucepan, you combine the cheer wine, the margarine, and the cocoa powder, bring it all to a boil, and then pour the hot mixture over your powdered sugar, stirring it slowly until everything's nice and smooth and a good frosting consistency. That's when you're going to add the almond extract and the chopped nuts, stirring it all the while to combine it. Then let your frosting cool about 20 minutes until it's, lukewarm or so. By that point, your cake's done. You want to let it rest and cool a little bit, and then just pour your icing all over the top. Boy, I'm telling you, I've had these a few times around the 4th of July, and while I really do like cheer wine, and I like having a cheer wine with my barbecue meal, really like to have barbecue cheer wine in my cake and cheer wine in the frosting on that cake. So you can't go wrong with that cheer wine. In fact, with these recipes, whether you use one of them or all of them, you can't go wrong anywhere you turn. You're sure to be a hit at your 4th of July celebration, or really any summer picnic that you go to over these next few months. If you make any of these recipes, please be sure to take a picture, post them on Instagram, and tag the Low and Slow Barbecue Show. Better yet, email them to lowandsslowbarbecueshow@gmail.com. I'll be looking for them, and then I'll share them out with the world on the Lowdown newsletter, and then post them on Instagram. So as we wrap up the recipes, really appreciate everybody listening on this 4th of July episode of the Low and Slow Barbecue Show. Want to wish everyone a happy Independence Day. Hope you can celebrate our 4th of July holiday safely and with as much fun and barbecue as you possibly can. You've been listening to the Low and Slow Barbecue Show on the Mesh.tv network of podcasts. Be sure to visit us online at lowslowbbqshow.com. That's where you'll find the blog, and you can hear other podcast episodes. If you like what you hear in the Low and Slow Barbecue Show, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating in your favorite podcast network. That really helps us and other people find our podcast. That's what we want to try to do. Spread the good word of the Carolina barbecue and the low and slow cooking traditions that we have here. So give us that rating, and it helps other people find our podcast. Remember, you can also visit lowslowbbqshow.com. That's where you're going to find a couple of those recipes. I'll get the baked beans up there, and Jim's barbecue ribs are up there as one of the first episodes we did in our podcast series. Just look for the 4th of July ribs from Jolly Old England, and you'll have all the recipe details as well as some more information about how Jim makes his ribs. While you're at lowslowbbqshow.com, you can also subscribe to the Lowdown newsletter. Do that, and we'll send you the latest podcasts, blogs, recipes, barbecue events, all that and more directly to your inbox every Tuesday morning. Special thanks this week to our producer Andrew Moose and the whole team at the Mesh.tv network of podcasts. Most especially, thank you for listening to the Low and Slow Barbecue Show on the 4th of July. Remember, for the best barbecue and the best barbecue podcast, make it low and slow.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.